Hey, today we are talking about knowing God. Now I know what you're thinking, Ben, that seems like a very simple value. I think you're right. I think it is simple, and it should be simple. But the reason that it's part of BP Church's core values is because it's so important that we know God. It's also so important that we know the simple truth of the gospel. See, when we accept Christ, what we're accepting is that God sent his Son to die for our sins and defeat death so that we could have life and life to the full. It's important that we choose to embrace the simple gospel. It's important that we choose to embrace that God sent his Son to die for us. See, when we embrace these things, what ends up happening is it changes the way that we worship and the way that we engage with God. See, when I think about the ways that God has come through for me in my life, it changes the way that I worship. When I think about the fact that God chose me, a person undeserving, a person full of sin, he chose me to be saved. That changes the way that I interact with people, that changes the way that I worship, that changes the way that I talk to God. It changes every bit about my being. And it's so important that we operate in that freedom, operate in what God has given us and not get stuck in the past. See, the more that I get to know God, and the more that I get to know his character, the more that I am in love with him. The more that I just think, wow, my God is so, so good. See, and the cool part is as we start to grow in our relationship with Jesus, we start to understand his voice. And the way that we understand his voice is by praying continuously every day. Because we believe that consistent prayer, consistent faith-filled prayer fosters intimacy. And when we grow more intimate with Jesus, we understand more and more of his character. See, Jesus modeled a healthy prayer life. He was the guy who, in the midst of just terrible, terrible struggle, turmoil even, when he's about to go to the cross, he's praying, Father, take this cup of suffering away from me. But if it's your will, let it be so. In the same way, he taught the disciples how to pray. He said, Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. And he walked the disciples on what a good prayer looks like. In the Bible, it says that when the disciples were on the boat, what happened was Jesus was on the mountaintop praying. And he was praying, but when the disciples needed help, when they needed help, he ran to their aid. And I love that. But Jesus models this healthy prayer life because he understood that connection to the Father is the most important thing. See, he understood that when he got to know God deeper and more intimately, it would change the way that he operated. And in the same way, when we understand who our God is, it changes everything about us. See, when I think about how I am never alone because my God is always by my side, it changes the way that I work. In Psalm 23, it talks about how God is with us through the valleys, the dark times, the difficult seasons. And it also says that after those times, he will prepare a table for us, a feast in the presence of our enemies. And a feast is a celebration, and a table, like bringing out all these things on the table, indicates that there's peace in the situation where there shouldn't be peace. See, what I understand is that my God is a God who can bring peace into any situation. See, what I understand is that when I walk with Jesus, I am never alone. What I understand through a consistent prayer life is that when I pray faith-filled prayers, I know that breakthrough is going to happen. So the more that I get to know God, the deeper that I know him, the more that I walk in line with his Spirit. The more that I can walk in confidence, knowing who he is and what he has done for me.